Hey James, how are you?
Really hot.
We're recording this for people like context. We're recording this on an extremely hot day. I don't know if this was the hottest day. I haven't been in the country for a few weeks, so I don't know. But this does feel like an extremely hot day.
Yeah, we're getting close to people melting in their chairs now, which is just far too
Yeah,
much.
and I guess for a bit behind the scenes of podcasting, I guess is that you can't have a fan, you can't have air conditioning because they create too much background noise. So we're both sort of roasting in our own individual rooms, which is a fun
For
experience.
people
But it's
listening, wondering what the high life is when it comes to podcasting,
This is
I'm
it.
stood at
This is
my
behind the
desk,
scenes. Yeah, exactly.
dripping in sweat.
If you do want to check out our sweaty faces, then you can check it out on YouTube if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Little plug there. So let's get to it,
Nice.
James, because you have a very sort of different, I guess, varied background of like different things that you're working on, different projects, and
Mm.
I would love to see how they intertwine with each other because they are very different, and I think there are probably complementary features about them. So I guess before we jump into that, you mind giving a bit of background?
Where do I start? Um, um, Background into me is that I kind of fell into entrepreneurship, but have always felt very different. Have always felt that I didn't quite belong. And therefore, it was always a question for me as to like, why do I feel this way? So I left uni with a politics degree, didn't want to go into politics because fuck that. And then, um, and then fell into recruitment as almost 90% of graduates do. And then realized that I was really, really good at selling, but I was really crap at process. And most of recruitment is, well, half of recruitment is process and the other
Mm.
half of recruitment is talent on the sales side. And I was just shit at admin and process, and so I was like, what am I going to do? I then got headhunted by a startup, Street Bees, which at the time had just raised a 12 million series A, and I was building their team. We took the company from 50 to 100 in about 9 months. And it was then when I was like, wow, this is what a startup is. Like, yeah, everyone's like going around. We're not in suits anymore. I'm walking around in shorts. I've got free coffee. Like dogs in the. I was like, wow, this is wicked. And then I got made redundant. and um and it was at that time where I was like, okay, I'm gonna get into. I wanted to build a startup. I started a startup with my mum, which I don't recommend anyone does, unless your mum is incredibly different to you. Um, my mum and I are very similar, and from a personality perspective, and that just didn't work. Anyway, we built that and we scaled that business. Um, That business is still going. I kind of exited in 2019, and it do 1 million in revenue this year, which is fantastic. So reinventing how people lose weight, focused on why people ate, not what people ate, and
Mm.
that was really effective. But I left because of my mental health. I was raising £1 million at the time in 2019, and the process of fundraising, my god. First time I'd ever done it, I was kind of like this naive 24-year-old being like, 23-year-old being like, woohoo, go out to market, sit in a load of VC offices, raising money, happy days, go build a big business. That just isn't that. It just isn't what happens. Um,
Mm.
and so I did all right. I got down to for somebody who'd never fundraised before, I could really talk the talk. Um, I'd never walked the walk though before.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got down to term sheet phase with 5 people, and then they all pulled out at once uh, on my on my now fiance's birthday in November. And it was that moment where I was like beginning to feel this crash in my mental health. I was beginning to wonder like, why am I struggling to get out of bed?
Yeah.
And that quickly led to me having to leave the company because I was just in such a state. And then in 2020, I was suicidal. 2 attempts on my life, and then slowly got very interested in the mental health space. I started a podcast which did very, very well, The Rut, which focused on men's mental health. And then I was advising startups in mental health, and I'm kind of giving you a potted history of who I am. But
Yeah,
if
yeah, yeah.
anybody's bored, please do um, fast forward like a minute or so. I'll get to the point. Don't worry. Um, and then yeah, started advising and investing in mental health startups because I was just like really like tiny checks, but for me it was more my time. And then I rescued a very fat Alaskan Malamute, which if people are watching or this goes up on LinkedIn or whatever, he's behind me. That's Diesel. He's 9. Sorry, he's 10 now. And when I rescued him, he's 9 years old. And he was locked in a conservatory for 2 years. I mean, can you imagine that?
Mm.
I don't understand why people do it. Um, and he came to me with behavioral problems. And I was like, right, I'm going to find a really good dog trainer best suited to his age, his breed, his Alaskan Malamute, behavioral problems. And that kind of service in dog training doesn't exist. And that was like a light bulb moment.
Mm.
2021, January, still in lockdown. And I was like, this is where I'm headed. I love dogs. I honestly, I'd much prefer dogs to people. And it was that opportunity where I was like, wow, here's like a $4 billion industry. That is a total shambles.
Yeah.
And it needs an entrepreneur who's young, hungry, and is going to bash some heads together and start selling the dream and building the dream
Mm.
of a connected dog training world. And that so happens to be me.
And that's the business. Wow, summed up in a few minutes. Lovely. There's a few things in your answer there, James, that I really want to pick out. And the first one, I think you mentioned you didn't feel a sense of belonging in
Mm.
like entrepreneurship. Like, why was that? And you think that that was the same case when it came to the VC conversations? You felt like the imposter in the room.
I think almost everybody suffers from some form of imposter syndrome. Um, I The problem with my first company was I wrapped my entire self-worth in the business and that fundraise being successful. And what I mean by that is I'd wake up every single day and just tell myself, you're good enough and this is going to succeed. And
Mm.
basically, what that meant was if it didn't succeed, whether that be fundraising or the company, I was already setting myself up for failure when it
Yeah.
comes to being able to actually detach myself
Hmm.
from success, failure, move on, learn from it,
Yeah.
etc. I could not do that.
I think, like, just to, I guess, highlight, it's not just, I think whenever you get to a stage where you're evaluating self worth or any sort of happiness, I guess, on external things like raising
Mm,
money, like in your case, it was raising money, but in other people's cases, listening, it could be a lot of different things. It could be like, it could be completely different to money. But when
hmm
you kind of get to that stage where it's like, if I get to this level of income, if I raise this much money, or if this person says that I've got an amazing business or whatever, that's when I'll be happy. And I think you're snookering yourself massively there. And I've experienced it myself where I'm like just working nonstop, just grinding. And I'm like, yeah, if I get to this stage, then that's when I'll be happy. It's like, oh, no, but then when that actually comes, it's like the next step is even when I'm going to get happier. And it's like, it's the continual rat race that I think I've
mm.
discovered about myself in the last 2 years. Um, how did you, yeah, so was that the point in your life where you discovered that about yourself?
I think happiness is and I've done a lot of soul searching over this and generally just been interested in this whole thing because I was so unhappy. But I think happiness is quite a transactional state of being. You can flick in and out of it quite quickly.
Yeah.
But actually, where people want to get to is that feeling of joy. And joy as a kind of concept is very interesting because it encapsulates many different emotions. being content with your situation, being grateful, being flicking in and out of happiness. At the end of the day, nobody can be happy all the time. That's just not how human beings work.
Mm.
And it's about finding what the things that you can tick off each month or week that make you happy. And in my case, I have a happy list that I know if I don't do X, Y, and Z in a week, then I know that my mental health will probably suffer.
Mm.
Such as spend really, really good quality time, not like drunk time, but quality time with my friends and my fiance, walk my dogs, and go to the gym. They're the three things that like are so important to me, and they make me feel good.
Mm.
But actually, what that kind of state is of being like just in this place of joy is a combination of those different things. And that's
Mm.
really what I've learned. It's like not striving for happiness, because I was always the kind of person who was like, right, success for me is when I make my first million.
Yeah.
And actually that's horseshit, because it never ever ever works out like that. Success then became for me, right, I needed to raise money. When I didn't raise money, I was incredibly unhappy, and I let it completely take over my life, and it almost killed me. And now raise money with Luna, and lots of it, and it's a step in the process versus the be all and end all. And so that's been massively critical in how I kind of perceive being a founder, being an entrepreneur, but also like understanding how I can cope day to day,
Yeah.
and what milestones and goals I need to be hitting myself, not
Hmm.
for me to be like be successful, but to be in a state of happiness or joy.
Mm. James, I want to ask you because you've been in, obviously, you suffered with this yourself, but I think it goes across the board, even for people listening now, myself, that, young entrepreneurs hoping to do some amazing things, though who maybe like, probably already done some amazing things. I guess what's the biggest challenge that you've seen for young people in entrepreneurship? I like the biggest one I would probably see is the toxic information that exists within startups and entrepreneurship on Instagram and like all this sort of fake information and I guess the motive of like getting rich as quick as you can and that sort of thing. And I feel like it doesn't paint the whole picture of like how hard you need to work, which sets people up for sort of like anxiety. I feel when they don't reach that. So I don't know
Mm.
yourself. What have you encountered within young people that you think's, I guess, the most repulsive for you that you don't like that people can help with?
I think it's the battle between yourself every day. You're always switched on. You're always thinking. That's essentially what happens. If you love doing something, or you want to achieve something, or you want to build something,
Mm.
the nature of the game is you think about it a lot. And I think actually it's the game you can play with yourself. And if you can master that quickly and learn how to master it, that's when you can really start to kick on. And
Mm.
that's where I
Okay.
see the biggest issues with young people um, coming out, because they don't quite understand what the game with themselves it is.
Do you mind talking about that? What is the game
Yeah,
within yourself, and in the
the
context of
game is
starting a business?
the game is waking up being like, fuck, I've got like 4 months in the bank, or I've got 1 month in the bank, and being like, right, okay, what do I have to do? Versus going, oh my god, this is the worst thing ever. I'm riddled with anxiety, and actually I can't do the things I need to do to progress. Or seeing somebody, you mentioned it's like seeing somebody on Instagram, or seeing somebody on LinkedIn, or seeing somebody on Twitter posting these whopping great growth metrics, or raising loads of cash, or a new competitor coming into your market, or um, hiring statistics. It is a constant battle of you consuming information, digesting that information by yourself, and then
Mm.
actually sitting with that information and going, Oh God, yeah, that makes me feel really uncomfortable. Why? And that is the battle you have to go through yourself.
So what's the solution there?
And
Do you switch off LinkedIn? Do you have a different relationship to LinkedIn and Instagram? Like what's the when it comes to
well,
this battle with the game, like what is the solution for people listening?
first and foremost, I deleted Instagram. Um, Not because I follow loads of people who've got amazing startups on Instagram. It's actually quite the opposite. It's all my friends, and a lot of the sacrifices that I make as a founder, um, most of my friends don't make because they're in kind of like quote unquote normal jobs, which is fine and
Hmm.
perfect. They're really really happy, but equally the fear of missing out and also the fear of like being like, oh God, I'm not there because I'm doing something, I'm building something, I'm working on a Sunday or whatever, I can't go for beers or whatever. That makes you feel shit.
Yeah.
Never makes you feel good. You never look at that and go, oh God, yeah, I'm really glad my friend's having a great time. You don't do that. You sit there and go, why the fuck wasn't I invited? Or fuck me, this is shit. I feel crap because I'm on my own or whatever. And that is one half of the game that I had to play with myself. It was like, I realize this is causing me stress and emotional damage and anxiety that I don't need because
Mm.
my job and what I want to do is already stressful, anxiety riddled, because that's the nature of the game. So get rid of it. Get rid of it. Best thing I ever did in
Mm.
I did it in did it in December last year. I posted
Yeah.
obviously that I got engaged and then was like, right, I'm deleting this. Um
But James, it's like I
I
hate to interrupt you, but let me give this
no,
counter
go for
argument
it.
because I know a lot of people would be saying this. Is like if you're growing a business, even your one, to be fair, you do need these tools to grow, like Instagram, LinkedIn. You need these tools to grow. So, where is the line between your own personal consumption and you doing it for promotion of your own business? Because like it's vital,
It's a
right,
good
for
question.
a lot of B two
It's a
C
good question.
businesses.
Yeah, so I outsource social media. I don't do it. Like I take it away from me because I realize that it just gives me unnecessary pressures and it doesn't cost that much to outsource it. But I think also one of the big things about being a founder is knowing that you don't actually have to do everything. I don't do
Mm.
everything in my business and I love that. I outsource as much as possible. My diary's outsourced.
Hmm.
My
I know.
Um, most of my team is outsourced. Well, that's not true. But a large part of the team's outsourced. Social media is outsourced. It's there is no point in you sitting there doing everything yourself because you'll end up doing nothing. And especially the fact I don't like social media. I don't really like it. I like LinkedIn because it's got a really different engaged community and I've got a good following on there, and I get a lot out of it because it's kind of my tribe. But equally on like Instagram, I don't need to run that. um
Mm.
Also, we're a B2B business at the moment, so a lot of it is kind of direct sales,
Yeah,
partnerships,
of
that kind of
course.
thing. We need a presence on social media, but I don't need to run it. And I think that's the most important thing for me. I can't speak for other businesses, but if you are at a stage where you don't really use Instagram for your business or whatever, or even your podcast, you're putting things up on Instagram on your podcast, and but you can't quite separate work and play, outsource it. Cost you £100 a month. Like I did that when I had the rut. I didn't want to go on Instagram that much, and I outsourced it.
Yeah, I mean, I for my podcast, that's what I do, but it's more of a productivity standpoint rather than protecting myself
Mm,
from men. I think
mm.
maybe as a
Mm.
sub sort of,
I
I
think it's
guess
both. I
as a
think it's
consequence
both.
for me, it has
Yeah,
happened,
yeah,
but that wasn't
yeah, yeah.
that wasn't the reason why I got into it, but it
No,
has definitely. I've noticed myself that it's definitely helped on that side as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I think a lot of other sort of advice that I've heard is like just post on Instagram, do like the scheduling tools. So there's loads of
Mm,
scheduling tools out there, and then that's it. Like just leave it.
yeah,
So you don't
yeah,
actually have to have the app itself on your phone to use it
yeah.
as a promotional tool if you don't have the funds at the beginning to outsource, right?
Correct.
Because you
Yeah,
can control it using these different apps, and a lot of them are free as well. Like people don't realize, but yeah, a lot of them are free. These softwares,
Mm.
Hootsuite is one that we used before. So yeah, there's loads of free ones that you don't have to engage with Instagram directly, because that can be a challenge. James, let me ask you, because so we talked on mental health, we talked about your mental health and I guess where you're going with that, but you also help a lot of startups that are trying to change the game when it comes to mental health, so building their own mental health startups. I
Yeah.
assume, like, I'm hoping a lot of people listening to this are also sort of like inclined to move that way, because there's like loads of different variety of people listening to this podcast, and a lot of them are very motivated by social change.
Hmm.
Is it a different type of business to grow one that's focusing on mental health?
No. And also, if anybody listening wants to get into mental health or has a really good idea and they've got a deck going or whatever, please send it to me. I'd love to get involved. Um, I am actively writing very, very small checks, but more my time. Um, and I love the mental health space. It's there's a long way to go. But there's no like pseudo framework that you need to execute to build a mental health startup. For example, Sanctus, who a lot of people know. I know the ex-founder now, James, really, really well. Um, he started by it was a manual services business. It's not tech enabled. There is a massive
Mm,
market for that. Moved into corporates, into the corporate side of things. Not really tech enabled. Built um, £1 million business on a website, Calendly, and Mailchimp. Like unbelievable, but
mm,
you can do it. And alternatively, I currently know startups that are doing amazing things in mental health, which are looking at a SaaS model, um, uh, connecting therapists with their clients through data capture and being able to um, provide like actionable insights, reports, and things that clients can do, and also alert the therapist. So there is no framework for success in building a mental health startup. For
mm,
me, if I'm investing in a founder, it is about the founder, like at the really early stage. Honestly, having done this 3 times myself, like investors don't. What I've also learned is that investors don't solely invest in you because of the idea. In fact, most of the reason why they invest in you is you and whether they think you're backable,
mhm.
um, and then how big the market size is, and there is a genuine plan to actually head into that market and do some cool shit.
Yeah.
Um, because founders pivot all the time, businesses pivot all the time. Like we've pivoted 3 times with Luna already. Like so, if I raised money for Luna back early last year on a marketplace, and then actually now we're building B2B SaaS, it's like, well, you can't invest in a business because solely because what the business does, and but actually you're investing in the market size and you're investing in the founder to go and execute a really cool product that's going to realize returns. So yeah, it's the same in the mental health space. Mental health is so important. Obviously, it is just as if not more important than your physical health most of the time, because there's so much of your physical health that stems from your mental health, and yet investors invest because they want returns. That's the nature of the game. Um,
But how do
it's
you?
not
But
all about.
that's a challenge. Like I know that's a fault of the industry at large, right? However,
I don't think it's a
for
fault. I don't think it's a fault. I don't think it's a fault. I
okay,
don't think it's a
what do
fault.
you
I
think it
think
is?
it's I think investors put money into businesses, whether that's in mental health or whether that's in like fertility. I don't know, but let's take mental health. Investors put mental money into mental health because they want to get a return. They also will. hopefully be passionate about it, and that's really, really important.
Mhm.
And they can see it. But if you're an investor, you're looking at the business proposition,
Yeah.
and and it is a very big bonus that you're really passionate about it. Now, I
Yeah.
know a lot of investors who also advise, and they'll also become kind of like operating partners, no problem. But at the end of the day, they invest money to realize a return. And in the
Yeah.
process of realizing a return, the business grows and the business impacts more and more people. I don't see that as a problem. I see that
Mhm.
um, as functional capitalism
Yeah.
and an important part of the process of growing a business. And it happens to change people's lives,
Yeah, no,
which I
I
think
fully
is a good
agree with
thing.
you. I think, yeah, the word fault was probably wrong in that context. But the point that I was trying to make was just having mental health as an angle is not enough, I guess. You need to have that commercial and growth element to it to be able to realize
Oh, yeah.
return. With
Yeah.
any
I
social
get.
business, right? My first social business failed because I thought it would do well enough just on the social element itself. But if it's just on the social element itself, it's just charity. It's not a scalable business, and you can't go to investors and pitch it to them. Some might give you money in terms of a charitable aspect, but yeah, to be a commercial business, you need to have other things.
We've
Yeah,
experienced
with
that at
any
Luna.
business.
Like
Yeah.
dog training is a big market, but actually, if you look at the TAM Samsung model of building a deck, or however you look at your market, like, is it going to be a big enough business to realize huge returns? We weren't quite sure. We know that it's going to impact a lot of people, but the business and the commercial side of it, we needed to work on. And actually, now that's grown into looking at the entire infrastructure of the pet care services industry. And that is massive.
Mm,
That, from a commercial perspective, is huge. And you have to be prepared to be flexible, to be quite fluid in this process. And also, if you're raising money, um, you've got to understand it from the investor's perspective. And actually, I tell founders, look at it from the investor perspective first and work backwards, because you have to capitalize the business, right?
mm,
But how are you going to do that? Well, you need to sell to investors. Okay, what are the investors going to look for? Great team, big enough market, numbers make sense.
mm, precisely.
Or they just absolutely love the product, because the product, if they invest in it now, more happens in healthcare and digital health, etc., or therapeutics, or pharma, but then they'll realize the commercials later. So yeah, if you, as a founder, you've got to look at it. You can't just be so engrossed in your own company and your own vision that you can't be prepared to look at uh, a slightly wider angle. And also, you
Mm,
have to understand the game you're playing. Like, I keep saying the word game because it is.
yeah.
It is. But life is a game, right? Like, life is a game. And if you work out how to play the game really well, you do, funnily enough, you do really fucking well.
Yeah, you level up, you
So,
get more opportunities. Like
exactly.
yeah, I completely agree with you. Like you get certain metrics, you get certain people on board, like stuff does go higher, like it elevates.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And if you're
yeah,
an
completely agree
athlete,
with you.
if you do 10,000 hours, that is the game. Or you become world class at your sport. Like, you've identified the little things that are in the game
Mm.
to win, and you're doing them consistently. You will win, and then you'll make shitload of money, and you'll probably not be happy because you'll retire and then snort a load of cocaine. But like, it will, you'll get there with the game. So,
That's a topic for another podcast, I think. James, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been amazing chatting with you. How can people stay in touch with you and what you're getting up to?
mate, this has been fun. Find me on LinkedIn. As I said, I deleted Instagram, so you won't find much on there. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn, James Roycroft-Davis. Bit of a mouthful, but I'm sure you'll post
We
my
will, yeah, of
link
course,
in
of
the
course.
show notes below. Yeah, so yeah, and I talk a load of waffle most of the time on entrepreneurship, startups, my own mental health, and most people are there for the dog content. To be fair, so yeah,
Great. Thank you so much again for coming on the podcast, James. I'm sure we'll chat very soon. Thank you so much.
yeah, top man, mate.